The fifth session of slip and trip issues covers always interesting topics relating to the Employment Equity Act and the Promotion of Equality and Prevention of Unfair Discrimination Act. We're going to start off with the Employment Equity Act. So the first issue that received attention under the Employment Equity Act is a retirement policy. The fights about retirement policies are never ending, but the last 12 months, the contribution is what happens when an employee gets notice of retirement in terms of the retirement policy. Does that amount to lawful termination or unlawful termination? That's over and above the fights about retirement policies being challenged in terms of Section 6.1 of the Employment Equity Act, or alternatively Section 187 of the Liability Act as automatically unfair. And then we get to cannabis. Big fights about cannabis. Cannabis happening at the workplace, and alternatively cannabis that takes place privately and off the premises. The question is, does Prince, the Constitutional Court judgment, provide a total good enough shield for employees not to be taken action against when they get tested positive in terms of an employer's alcohol abuse and substance abuse policy? The third issue that became important over the last 12 months is the revisiting of the elements to prove unfair discrimination. That what the employee generally perceives as unfair discrimination does not amount to unfair discrimination. The mere fact that your employer victimizes you, the mere fact that your employer dislikes you, the mere fact that your employer bullies you does not on its own amount to unfair discrimination in terms of the Employment Equity Act. There has to be a link between that action of your employer and either a listed ground or a non-listed ground. And finally, the Constitutional Court had its say pertaining to the inherent requirements of a job as a defense in terms of Section 6.2 of the Employment Equity Act. As always, equal work for equal pay claims are analysed, but in the last 12 months, specifically the issue of comparators used when such a claim made received attention. And lastly, under the Employment Equity Act, Section 60 of the Employment Equity Act and the vicarious liability of an employer. What can an employer do to escape that vicarious liability? The Supreme Court of Appeal had its say pertaining to the Promotion of Equality and Prevention of Unfair Discrimination Act, so applicable to white magistrates. You advertise a job, and in the job you indicated that yes, demographics are important. You indicate also that qualification experience is important, but then the applicant walks into the room and the applicant is a white male. Can you use that selection panel purely on that basis say, I am not going to consider that applicant? See you at the seminar.